Pat?
Hey, Laura.
Okay, all yours.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, there we go.
Awesome. All right. Well, my apologies for not being able to attend this year's conference in person. Actually, sitting in a conference room in Bellingham, Washington right now. But I'm Pat Franzen. I'm the Director of North American Digital Library Sales for SPIE. And apparently I'm good for causing problems at SST regardless if I'm in attendance or not. So apologies for the technical snafu here. Lauren, next slide. So a little bit about SPIE. We are the International Society for Optics and Photonics. Specifically, we work with light-based technologies and science to advance all sorts of different applied technology spaces, including manufacturing, robotics, medical imaging, displays, defense, communications, astronomy, and a lot more. So we're a pretty wide variety of buckets we play in. In general, we've got about 18,000 members and a total constituency about 265,000 people. Most of our business actually comes from events, which puts us in a unique spot in terms of the corporate subscription market. We get to interact with a lot of end users in the corporate space, and we host about 25 major events annually. They run from a couple hundred attendees up to about 23,000 at our largest event, and we host the SPIE Digital Library. Next. So a little bit about our digital library. It's the largest collection of applied optics and photonics research in the world. And we emphasize applied because most of our end users and readers are engineers. They're not necessarily theoretical researchers in academic settings. So I think the keynote yesterday spoke a lot about PhDs moving out of the academic world and into industry. And that's the community we play with the closest. Right now we've got about 460,000 research papers in the collection. We also have an ebook program that's got just over 300 ebooks. We publish roughly 18,000 papers and 25 to 30 books annually. And one of the biggest things we emphasize when approaching the corporate market is our patent citation. We're cited in over 100,000 patents right now, and kind of highlighting that is very effective in reaching corporate audiences and corporate ears. Next. So a little bit about our subscription base. Our global subscription base, I assume, is pretty consistent and pretty similar to most small societies out there. We're dominated by academic subscriptions, and we've got small slices that are with government agencies and corporate organizations. Our North American subscription base is a little bit more balanced, but still clearly dominated by academic subscriptions. And I actually joined SPIE in 2015, and since that time we've been pushing the corporate side more heavily than academic and government. And as you can see in the bottom graph, that we've had some success over the last couple of years. So next slide. So what we're going to focus on today are corporate subscriptions. Like I said, it's area of emphasis. It's what I focus on as part of my daily responsibilities. And specifically, we're going to look at or focus most of our time on corporates that don't have a defined library within the organization. So it's corporate sales to end users and researchers, not to librarians. Next slide. So how do we go about approaching the corporate market? We look internal first. So we've invested an enormous amount of money and effort in developing a pretty strong internal business intelligence system. We use Microsoft CRM, and basically what it does is anyone who interacts with us, we record. So we have great knowledge and great depth about the individuals who come in and out of our lives on a daily, a monthly, yearly basis. From a DL sales perspective process, what we actually look at first are our authors. I operate under the assumption that if you're going to publish with us, you probably should be reading us as well. So when we approach different organizations and inquire whether a digital library subscription makes sense for them, usually what we do is we try to identify an author that we feel is a champion of SPIE within the organization and just kind of feel them out. So the image that we're looking at on the right-hand side of the slide shows an internal report that we have. It's basically just an Excel pivot table. And what it allows me to do is track authors at individual organizations on a yearly basis and see exactly what they're up to. So in the case of Merck here, this is the Merck office in New Jersey. Dr. Belma Douglas is probably our main champion within the organization. What we're looking at is just a quick snapshot of the last 2 years. But what I know about her is that she's actually published about 8 papers with us. She's been active in our conferences. And that extends from her graduate years at USC up into her time at Merck currently. So, I use that information to kind of get a grasp and, information on whether it's a good fit or not. What I also do, and I don't actually have an image here, is I track individual sales. So we do, you can buy papers individually from SPIE, and I have a daily report delivered into my inbox that tells me who's buying content and what they're buying. And what it allows me to do is track, volume individual purchases and make informed decisions on who might benefit from a corporate subscription. Lastly, we actually monitor trends within our content and our technology space to see what areas are hot and emphasize those within those communities. So, for example, right now we're seeing a major uptick in technologies related to autonomous vehicles and LiDAR. We see a lot with artificial intelligence, remote sensing for agriculture. So those are all different markets that I'm now approaching. And most of that business intelligence, again, is being driven by internal reports that we're able to develop and deliver through our CRM. Next slide. We also rely a lot on external prospecting tools. We use a lot of external business intelligence databases. Specifically, I use Hoover's. It's somewhat limited, but what it allows me to do is get a good grasp on the competition of some of our subscribers. The pool of potential corporate subscribers for us has been widened tremendously by doing some basic, simple searches within Hoover's. I also live on LinkedIn just about 24/7. I think it's a pretty good prospecting tool as well. Usually what I do is I just do a bunch of random searches in LinkedIn. So the guy we're looking at right now, Dr. Vista, has published papers with us and works for Smuckers. So I would not necessarily ever approach Smuckers or think of them as a potential subscriber to the SPIE Digital Library, but apparently they've got some sort of research team in-house that's playing in our space. I also spend a lot of time looking at patent databases, going back to a couple slides ago where we talked about our patent citations. I find that lens.org is probably the most effective. What it allows me to do is get a 30,000-foot view on our patent citations around the world, and also delve into individual patent owners that cite SPIE content. So, for example, I think Microsoft cited us like 1,500 patents. If I were to approach Microsoft, that's a very valuable piece of information to share, with their librarian or their researchers. We also track related technical conferences that we don't host. There's all sorts of conferences on automotive sensing, We track what's going on at South by Southwest, what's going on at CES, PitCon, other events happening outside of our immediate community to see what companies might be exhibiting, what companies might have speakers representing them, just to see what kind of movement is coming in and out of our world. And lastly, what we do is we track mergers and acquisitions as well. And mergers and acquisitions we track not necessarily for new prospects, but to potentially grow the value of our existing subscriptions. If a current subscriber acquires a new company, usually what we do is we'll approach them pretty quickly and ask if they want to extend their subscription to the new facilities. And if they do, what we do is we usually, bump up their price a little bit. So it's a good way to, increase the distribution and the value of our existing corporates. Next. So in general, we have two types of corporate subscribers. We've got our core corporates, and these are the long-time subscribers. They've been with us virtually since day one. In general, they're in aerospace and defense, electronics, semiconductors. These organizations are downloading, north of 20,000 papers a year. The research and the technology that we're providing is content that's critical to their core activities. So what we see from them is consistent high usage across the board. Chances are our core corporates also have a defined library within the organization and librarians. So when we approach them, our approach to these organizations is pretty similar to how we would approach an academic institution or a government agency. Chances are the librarians have an MLIS, are familiar with counter, value content in a specific way that's consistent with what we see across other subscription channels. More often than not, these days we're playing with what I call our new corporates. They can range from the smallest of the small companies. I think our smallest subscriber right now has about 15 employees in the company, to massive organizations. I think our largest is about 150,000 employees. But, regardless of the size of the organization, what we find with these, say, new subscribers is the team that's working in optics and photonics is generally small. So they're not necessarily core to our technology space, but operate somewhere out in the periphery. More often than not, there's no clear purchaser. I'm approaching, heads of R&D, directors of engineering, folks like that. So folks who might not value research content in the same way that a librarian would value it. And with our new corporates, we see really fluid usage. So there are peaks and valleys. We're constantly monitoring usage just to make sure that, we don't fall off the cliff and lose a subscription. So what we're going to talk about over the next couple slides are our approach to new corporates. And Lauren, if you go to the next one. So one of the most important things, I think, when considering corporate subscriptions is what your strategy is going to be. We decided pretty early on that our corporate strategy was not identical to our academic strategy. And we made some pretty clear distinctions in how our corporate strategy was going to look. We've basically taken the approach that we elect to have greater market penetration and visibility than revenue per sale. So most of my corporate subscriptions these days are somewhere in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. We're not trying to go out and land big whales. We're trying to do quick, easy hits that, again, grow our market penetration rather than land $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 deals. Our basic approach is we'd rather be Netflix to our subscribers than Comcast. We want to be the subscription that you never think about, you just keep paying, and we're kind kind of operating under the radar. We don't want to come up on your P&L every year. So like I said, most of our new corporate sales are under 10,000. Talked a little bit about this earlier, but our basic approach is to find our champion and gauge if there is interest in the content within the organization. If we hear pretty loud and clear that there isn't, we'll just drop that prospect and move on to the next. What's interesting about our champions, and I'm going to assume that this holds true for most societies, is our most effective champions within an organization aren't necessarily members. One of the benefits of being a member to SPIE, which I assume is the case with a lot of you guys in the audience, is we give them a lot of free publications. So generally our members have more than enough papers to not justify spending more. So when we go out and look for people to approach, we're looking for people who interact with us, but for whatever reason haven't become members and don't have easy access to content. We also personalize the message. So, if I look at my author report, we looked at a couple slides back, I know a lot about these individuals. And when I approach them, what I'm going to do is focus on the technologies that are near and dear to their heart. So if I approach a laser engineer within a laser company, I'm talking about lasers. If I approach a radiology group, I'm talking about radiology. So we spend a good amount of effort actually personalizing the message and making sure it hits close to home. We push trials. Trials generally equal sales if you manage them effectively. And the big things we do is we follow our gut. If we feel we can land a guy at a certain price, we just drop that price. We don't try to get too fancy, and we make it easy. So, our academic license, which I assume, again, I'll make an assumption and assume is the same for a lot of societies, is a pretty cumbersome, intimidating document. It's multiple pages. There's all sorts of information in there. Our corporate license is the screenshot you see here, and it's an online form. And basically, we mimic, the kind of license you would see for software or a credit card. Our terms of use are, a pull-up screen that's linked on the form. All you have to do is click that you've read them and give us your NPs and you're good to go. So in general, our sales goal when approaching a corporate is to land them in 3 to 5 emails or less and spend only about an hour or 2 of labor. The idea is, again, low subscription costs, but really low labor. So we try to get as high an ROI as possible. Next. So a couple examples. We've had some success. We failed more than we succeed, but we've had some success. So just a couple quick case studies. Both of these organizations are Fortune 500s. So they're new corporates for us, but they could be core corporates. The first one was just kind of a shot in the dark, and somehow we lucked out. It's a massive company. We figured from searching on LinkedIn that they probably had, somewhere in the ballpark between 700 and 800 relevant FTEs to what we published at SPIE, but we really hadn't had much interaction. They weren't actually publishing papers with us. They rarely attended our conferences. We didn't have any active members. They did have a librarian that I was able to find. And he took a gamble and set up a trial. And we ran a 3-month trial with them and had 2 downloads. So it was an absolute failure. And it's kind of a crushing blow because I thought it could be a really good score for us. Anyway, long story short, I emailed the librarian at the end of the trial, said, I'm not going to give you usage reports because you only downloaded 2 papers. But if for some crazy reason you should choose to subscribe, here's your price. And I basically gave him a bottom-of-the-barrel price. He rolled the dice, set up the subscription, and since then we've actually seen steady growth in usage. So, like I said, we push trials because trials equal sales. You just have to be somewhat humble if the results don't yield or match what your expectations are. The second one corporate sales moving forward. So they've got some engagement with us, 9 authors over the last year, roughly 300 relevant FTEs. And basically what I did is I shot their head of engineering an email, said, interested in the subscription, here's the price, and I gave them a really low ball price. He called me back 5 minutes later and gave me a credit card. So that's by far the fastest subscription we've ever closed. But rather than get into some long, drawn-out process haggling over price, what we did is we named our price. The subscription closed in literally 15 minutes of labor. So yeah, we probably left money on the table, but our return on that transaction probably crushes anything else we have in-house. Next slide. So we obviously have a lot of struggles as well. Part of the reason we emphasize a lean approach to corporate sales is 19 out of 20 fail. There really isn't a great return in terms of volume on these sales. And these 2 examples are with what I would consider to be core corporations for us who are not subscribers. We do a lot with these people. They're pretty wealthy organizations. We see them constantly. We've got members and fellows within both organizations. We've had board members from the society within both these organizations. So the first one's the Medical Instrumentation Group based in Silicon Valley. They're public. They're valued at approximately $315 million. Again, not heavy FTEs, but FTEs that do use us relatively consistently. And the 50 FTEs, we see on an annual basis. We've had 17 authors in the last year. And I was speaking with their principal optical engineer at one of our conferences earlier this year, and we were talking about a subscription. And she was pretty blunt with me and said that on average, they're downloading probably 200 and 250 research papers a month from SPIE, but they have no need for a subscription because UC Berkeley is right around the corner. So, I think we see this with a lot of our major research universities. Basically, we've got corporates who, rather than sign up for a low-cost subscription with us, will send somebody on campus once a week and just download to their heart's content. So, this company, I really hold out little faith that I'll ever be able to land them because they've got a great solution for accessing our content at hand right now. Number 2 is actually more disturbing to us. So they're an aerospace defense company. They're worth about $4 billion. They do an enormous amount of work with us across the society. And their VP of R&D was actually a recent board member of ours. And during a meeting in our office at SPIE, in our conference room, we were talking about digital library subscriptions and said, it's crazy you guys don't have us. And his response to us was pretty simple. He said, why would I ever subscribe to you when I can get everything you have and IEEE at the same time off ResearchGate? Literally, his R&D team is spending a couple hours a day just scraping ResearchGate and getting as much technical information that they need from us, as well as other societies, as they need it. So again, it's another corporate that I don't hold much hope in landing anytime soon, because there are other opportunities available. So I guess one of the scariest things I've come to realize in working in the corporate sales world is, we think of ResearchGate and some of these other areas as being primarily academic focused. Corporate researchers are discovering as well. So, again, we have pretty good penetration. We're able to land a pretty good number of corporates, but I really actually have some reservations as to what impact ResearchGate, SciHub, sites like that will have moving forward. Next slide. So a couple final thoughts. As you're approaching a corporate sales strategy, before you get started, I think it's really important just to define what that strategy is. Do you want market penetration? Do you want the whales? Again, what makes sense? We've got pretty good synergy throughout the organization as to what our strategy is from the top down. and I think it actually helps us operate as effectively as we do. I think it's also really important to identify what your corporate market is. I'll give you a good story. So, had a conversation a couple months ago with a salesperson from a large publisher, and we were talking about, electronics subscription that we have in place. And he was like, I got to get that. We don't have that. And I was thinking to myself, your content's not at all relevant to what these people do. Why would they possibly ever subscribe to you? So I think that's a really important thing to know is, do you actually have a play within the corporation? If you're not in aerospace, don't approach Boeing. Same thing, if you're not in agriculture, don't approach Monsanto. So figure out where you exist within these corporate technology groups. And that kind of segues into the next bullet. Knowing your role within the company is, are you core to what they're doing, or are you on the periphery? And, approach that company with the understanding that you might only have 10 or 15 guys in-house, regardless of the fact that they have 150,000 total employees, and price accordingly. I also always recommend personalizing the sales experience as much as possible. Again, hitting close to home with people just, eases your prospect of winning the sale. And then the two things we emphasize in-house is we always experiment. We're always throwing different things against the wall just to see if they stick. And if something sticks, we pump it like crazy. And we keep it simple. We try not to overcomplicate the sales process. Again, we want to get in, we want to get out, and move on to the next one. And next. So, not sure if I'll be able to actually hear any of the questions that are going to be asked in the next 20 minutes, but if by chance I can't answer your question, here's my contact information. Shoot me an email, and I will be happy to help. And thanks, everyone. Apologize again for the technology issues.